May your Spirit be present with us, guiding us into understanding, and help us take out of your word what you would have us take out of it so that we could be more like you. In your name we pray. Amen. Oakley dokley. We are in... we're actually in two different passages in Scripture today. And that's because, y'all already know this, but I'm going to recap it just in case anybody's watching online and this is their first video. We're primarily going through 2 Kings, but we're also looking at the prophets. And lately we've been doing an overview of the book of Isaiah. And we've been spending several different weeks going through Isaiah, not verse by verse or anything like that, but just in an overview manner. I think we spent 3 different weeks on it. And where we ended last week was Isaiah chapter 35. And the reason why we stopped at Isaiah 35 is because for the next several weeks we are going to go in depth into Isaiah chapters 36, 37, 38, and 39. Not because we're focusing on Isaiah, but because those chapters directly correlate to some of the chapters we read in 2 Kings, which is the primary book that we are going through. Right? So the first 12 or so verses of 2 Kings are unique to... of 2 Kings chapter 18 are unique to the book of 2 Kings. But after that, if you actually held the books side by side and you compared 2 Kings to Isaiah, you'd actually see that these sections are practically word for word. Right? There might be a few little details here and there, but more or less they are word for word, which has led to all sorts of debate about who borrowed from who. Was it the author of 2 Kings taken from Isaiah? Was it the author of Isaiah taken from 2 Kings? We ultimately don't know. What's that?
Were they one and the same?
Yeah, were they one and the same? Yeah, we really have no idea. But that being said, this is actually really cool for us. Because what this tells us is that the 3 chapters we're going to be going through in 2 Kings, chapters 18, 19, and 20, they're very important chapters. They're so important, in fact, that Isaiah, which predominantly has been poetic, he takes the time in the middle of his book to just hit the pause button and spend several chapters of his story focusing on a single event that took place during the reign of this king named Hezekiah. And so whenever you're reading Isaiah, you probably recognize the importance of these events more than you do in 2 Kings. Because in 2 Kings, we've already been reading narrative. Yep. Right? We've already been reading, there was this king and this king. We've been reading all these events. But in Isaiah, you're reading poetry, 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 pause button, event. And you're like, that's weird. And then the rest of the book is poetry after that. And so this section right here in Isaiah is actually a shifting and turning point in the whole story. It's like the seam which holds the rest of the book together. There's like Isaiah 1 to 35, and there's Isaiah 40 through 66, and chapters 36 to 39 are the narrative which bridges the gap. And basically the reason why is because we're going to see Hezekiah come face to face with the Assyrian army. And he has to make a decision. Am I going to trust in God, or am I going to trust in foreign powers? And his decision is going to affect not only the fate of Judah, but also the trajectory of the rest of the book of Isaiah. Right? And so this is significant both in 2 Kings, which is detailing the fall of the 2 kingdoms, but it's also significant in Isaiah because what has been like the central thing that Isaiah has been calling the people to?
Repentance.
Trust in God.
Yeah, well, trust in God, right? One big thing that Isaiah has been emphasizing is the theme of Emmanuel, right? God with us, right? He's been talking to the southern kingdom, and he's been saying, if you will trust in God, you will see He is with us. But you need to rely on Him rather than on foreign nations. And so that's why these chapters are pretty significant in Isaiah's context, because this is the big moment, right? To where he's been telling them for several kings now, trust in God, trust in God, trust in God. And finally, the Assyrians are knocking at Jerusalem's door. And so Hezekiah is going to have to decide whether or not he's going to listen to the other politicians or listen to the prophet Isaiah. And quite fittingly, Isaiah is going to show up in the text of 2 Kings, which is kind of cool, right? We haven't actually seen, we haven't really seen any of the prophets mentioned other than Jonah. Yeah. They haven't been mentioned in the text, but Isaiah is going to be mentioned in these chapters, which is pretty cool. That being said, we've got it's not a super long chapter today. We've had longer ones, but we've had shorter ones too. I think it's 37 verses. Anybody get a chance to read it ahead of time?
2 Kings?
2 Kings 18?
Oh. I was reading Isaiah because, some chapters in Isaiah because I thought we were going through Isaiah.
I am almost caught up.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but technically we are going through 2 Kings and Isaiah today. It just kind of works out that way. And so, Today we are going to be looking at 2 Kings chapter 18, which is going to begin detailing Hezekiah's reign and specifically the threat of Assyria. So, we hop in chapter 18, beginning in verse 1. Sean, take it away.
Now it happened in the 3rd year of Hoshea, the son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, became king. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did what was right in the sight of Yahweh, according to all that David his father had done. He took away the high places, and shattered the sacred pillars, and cut down the Asherah. And he broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made, for until those days the sons of Israel were burning incense to it, and it was called Nehushtan. He trusted in Yahweh, the God of Israel, so that after him there was none like him among all of the kings of Judah, nor among those who were before him. So he clung to Yahweh. He did not turn away from following him, but kept his commandments, which Yahweh had commanded Moses.
Alrighty. Wow. So we're introduced to Hezekiah, and what do we feel about him in general?
He sounds
Good
like
guy.
a good dude.
Yes. Why does he sound like a good dude?
Because rather than... So we've run into kings of Judah in the past who have been good in the sight of Yahweh, but it had always specified that they kept the high places, which is something that God has spoken against many, many times. But Hezekiah goes a step further, and he actually tears down all the high places. He gets rid of all of the foreign idols and worship, and clings to God and holds his commandments.
Yeah. Which is pretty crazy, because who is Hezekiah's dad?
Ahaz.
Ahaz. And what was Ahaz known for?
Wasn't he the guy that...
Didn't he, sacrifice his son in a
Yep.
flame
Indeed he did.
to Molech?
Yeah. So pretty crazy. You would not expect such a godly guy to come from such an ungodly guy.
Although
Unless...
if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, because Hezekiah's like, hey, you killed my brother.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. It's probably like one of those cases where, sometimes, you do see this on occasion where, whenever a parent is so bad, a kid is like, all I know is I don't want to be anything like you when I grow up. And so, it seems like Hezekiah just had a good head on his shoulders, and he was like, maybe, since my dad absolutely sucks, I should just be the opposite of him. And rather than being an absolute trash bag, maybe I should try to honor God. And he does a really good job of that. So let's walk through it. Now, it happened in the 3rd year of Hoshea, the son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, became king. Alright, so you'll notice here that the details seem kind of off a little bit, because if you look over at my little my little table up there, what's wrong there?
That doesn't line up.
It doesn't line up. In what way does it not line up?
Ahaz was still king when the kingdom of Israel fell.
Yes. Yeah, so...
Hezekiah was not.
Yeah, so Hezekiah, it seems like, doesn't become king until after the kingdom of Israel falls, whereas in the text it says, well, no. He became the king during the 3rd year of Hoshea. But what year did Hoshea start reigning?
732.
Yeah, the same year that Ahaz started reigning, which is very strange. And so most likely what that indicates is what?
Were there 2 kings at the same time?
Probably some sort of co-regency going on to where Ahaz very early on was raising up Hezekiah to be his heir, right? And wasn't there...
He was super young when he took the throne, though. Ahaz was only 20 when he took the throne.
It's true.
Which doesn't...
Well, to be fair, there's been a 7-year-old king in the history of Judah at this point, so I don't know. But it also says he was 25 years old when he became king, in which case, I don't know, there's some interesting stuff going on there.
Yeah.
I'd have to look into it more. I know that people have ironed this stuff out before. I just probably should have looked into it more prior to us starting.
Is the verses in Isaiah, or are these? No, you said this is not in Isaiah.
No, it doesn't start until verse 13, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Whenever we get to the next slide, I'll try to, while Sean's reading, I'll try to look into it a little bit more and figure out exactly what the dating is there. Anyways, so we'll come back to that later on because I do want to kind of give y'all some sort of rough answer. But it is kind of weird. So, long story short, what we do know is that Hezekiah is king at the time that Hoshea, like in the Northern Kingdom, falls, right? And that is significant because basically we get to see that as the Northern Kingdom is falling, well, Hezekiah is preparing the Southern Kingdom to thrive, right? To where two radically different responses here. And so he was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. Sorry, this whole dating thing is like really like...
Yeah, it also says in the beginning of chapter 17 that Hoshea became king in the 16th year of Ahaz.
Interesting. I'll have to just look into all that then, because I need to figure out why all those dates are weird. Okay, so I'll look into it later on. What's that?
I was just to add, unless it's like one of those things where verse 1 is referring to like when he started being raised up, and then maybe the 25 years old is like when his like reign is like by himself.
Yeah, well, I was trying to do the math right there because I was trying to do like 716 BC plus 25 would be what, 741 BC? Is that correct?
For what?
Like so, if Hezekiah started reigning in 716 BC and he was 25 years old, that would have him being born in 741 BC.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be 9 years before Ahaz was king, and if Ahaz was 20, that means Ahaz had him when he was 11, which is also weird. So that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to do the math in my head. It's not computing right. I'll look into it in a second and try to figure all that out. But I know that people have ironed this stuff out. It's just something that I probably should have looked into ahead of time. Anyways, he was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And the 29 years, you'll see, does match up to the dates that we have on there. And his mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. Basically just indicating who the mom was.
The daughter of Zechariah.
And he did what was right in the sight of Yahweh according to all that David his father had done. And just Nick's over here like pumping his fist. I imagine that's how Jewish people are supposed to be responding when they read this. Right? It's just like, if you just imagine, I don't know. So after the people come back from exile, there's this really cool story in Ezra whenever he stands up in front of everybody at like a podium and basically begins to read the law and like they read through all the scriptures. And I imagine them like getting to this story, if it was written at that point, and just getting there and they'll say, and they did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and it's like they just like start hissing, and he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. They're like, yeah, so like just like applauding. I think that's how you're supposed to respond, right? So this is really exciting news because not only did he do what was right in the sight of Yahweh, he did according to all that David his father had done. There is no greater compliment that a king could receive than this right here. He took away the high places, and he shattered the sacred pillars, and he cut down the Asherah. Like you can just feel like each thing is like, yes, yes, yes. And he broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made. For until those days, the sons of Israel were burning incense to it, and it was called Nehushtan. Oh, what's the deal with that?
Nehushtan.
No idea.
Pagan
It
god.
just means the serpent, right?
I was going to look it up, but I know it sounds like just serpent.
It feels like almost
I know.
another
I think
form
serpent's like
of the-
Nakash.
Yeah, but I saw like it's at the root there.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the bronze serpent and like numbers that
Uh-huh.
God had. That was after. I don't remember the event that they. I don't remember the context of the disobedience, but
Wasn't
they weren't.
there a plague?
Well, they weren't trusting, and God sent fiery serpents on them, and then many
Yeah.
people perished, like thousands of people perished. And so he told Moses to construct a bronze serpent and put it on a nesh, like on a standard,
Mm-hmm.
and said that anyone who would look upon it would be healed. And it was like Jesus said, foreshadowing him. But I guess it never talked about it really after that. But I guess it just stuck around, and people looked at it as like a good luck charm and prayed to it and burned incense and stuff. Worshipped it.
Yeah, I think it just kind of shows that this is what humans tend to do. We tend to make idols of things. I don't remember. It was one of the reformers, maybe Martin Luther or something like that, but he said that like our hearts are idol-making factories.
Yeah.
This is just what we do. Like we like elevating things, especially if they're sacred religious objects.
We'll take like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's like
Yeah.
if we had like a clear thing of like this is the cross that Jesus died on, we'd be like doing the same thing.
Yes. Yeah. It's 100% just what humans do. We're very good at worshiping everything except for what we're supposed to actually worship.
The one that created.
Yes.
It's one of the hardest commandments for us to eat.
Yeah. Well, we like worshiping things that we can see.
Yeah.
It's just easier, right? That's why it's
why so
easier
many
for us to
people don't
idolize relationships or idolize entertainment or idolize all sorts of other stuff. What's that?
Celebrities.
Yeah, it's just easier because it's something physical that we can see.
Yeah.
Whereas we're called to worship something we can't see. And so that's where it's like, especially religious relics become so tempting because it feels like it bridges the gap, right? Towards like, ooh, well, God told us we were supposed to lay our eyes upon the bronze serpent and like live, so let's worship it. It's like, no, like that's not the same. But they did the kind of like, there'd be a same temptation with the Ark of the Covenant and stuff as well, right? If you go back to 1 Samuel, whenever they went off to battle and they lost the battle, they're like, oh, if we just got the Ark of the Covenant, then we would win the battle. It's like, no, it doesn't matter. The Ark of the Covenant can be buried deep in the ground. All that matters is that you're worshiping the God whose presence is in the Ark of the Covenant.
You
right?
can literally build one.
Yeah.
The instructions are in the Bible.
Yeah.
Ironically, with the Ark example, like the whole thing is the Ark was like what contained God's presence, and like in the context of like Isaiah, we've been talking about like God being with them, like
Yeah.
like a lesson there would be like that they wouldn't need the Ark with them. They just need to like as long as they trust, that's where God is
Yes.
with them.
All they need is faith.
Yes. All you need is faith. But yeah, so this is what humans do, and like y'all mentioned, we don't really read about this anywhere else in Scripture. It just kind of shows up here. We're like, we read about the original bronze serpent. I looked it up. The word Nehushtan, it just means a thing of brass. But that's because the word serpent sounds like brass, or like, I think it literally just means like fiery one. Like, it's like a, or that's even more like the word seraph and stuff. It's like somewhat related in some way. I don't know.
The word, it's a little wordplay.
But yeah, like, so Nahash, it just means brass or serpent, and that was the whole thing there. So Nehushtan just means the brass thing. So they're like, yeah, let's go worship the brass thing. Like, this is what they called it. I've noticed, what's funny about that is like, there's really not a lot of the names in the Bible aren't very like creative. It's like, hey, Jacob came out grabbing his heel. We should name him Heel Grabber. It's like, hey, he's got red hair. Let's call him Red. Jesus is like, your name's Peter. Or your name's, I'm going to call you Rocky. Like, it's just, the names aren't crazy inventive. It's like, Jacob like wakes up, he's like, wow. Like, I saw angels ascending and descending. It's almost like God lives here. I'll call this place Bethel, the house of God. It's like, right, like the names aren't that creative. They're like, that's the bronze thing. But the good thing about Hezekiah here is that he is perceptive enough to basically realize that this bronze serpent thing is going beyond what God intended. And he actually does something which you can imagine probably created quite a stir at the time. He just outright destroys it. Right? He takes this religious relic that dates back almost 1,000 years and has been with their people and is a testament to God's grace. And he realizes that it is such a stumbling block that he breaks it in pieces. Like, I can imagine even like the conservative people who weren't worshiping it at the time, I can imagine them being like, ugh. You can imagine them getting nervous too, right? It's almost like, this is like the equivalent of somebody like realizing, like, have you ever heard of like people accusing some conservative Christians of like bibliolatry? It's the idea of like Christians being so devoted to the Bible that they worship the Bible more than God himself, right? Which I think is actually a danger that we all face, right? Like we don't want to do that, right?
It's essentially becoming like Pharisees.
Yeah. And it's where it's like we almost like elevate. You actually see this whenever people prioritize like just studying scripture over living it out and like loving one another, right? It's just about like increasing knowledge. That's bibliolatry, right? It's like, congratulations, you have now elevated the Word of God over God himself, which is a problem. But this is like the equivalent of me like realizing this was a problem, and so I just like go burn the Bible. It's like you'd be like, oh, whoa, let's not do that. And to be fair, that'd be a little bit different, because like if this were the only Bible in the world, I would be depriving people of like very key information. He's not quite doing that, but it is still a strong statement, right? He is saying, I don't care how important this relic is, and I don't care how significant you think it is. If it's getting in the way of you and God, it's got to go. It's like if we found the actual cross of Jesus, and I chopped it into a bunch of pieces, or I just threw it in a wood chipper.
Or maybe like the Shroud of Turin or something like that.
Yeah, the Shroud of Turin. Yeah, same thing. Where it's like, yeah, like where it's people are like bowing down and worshiping it, and I just like light it on fire. And they're like, what are you doing? That was a really important relic. I don't care. It was getting in the way of you worshiping God. It's like, whoa, like that's a strong statement, right? Because even people who weren't worshiping it would be like, that was extreme. But the author of 2 Kings says that's a positive thing, right? The author of Kings does not seem to think, oh, yeah, he was kind of a bit extreme there. No. He's like, yeah, he took away the high places, shattered the sacred pillars, and he broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made, for until those days the sons of Israel were burning incense to it, and it was called Nehushtan. So he says, yeah, Hezekiah was so pious that he recognized that this thing that had once been an object of their salvation had actually become a vehicle to their destruction. And so he said, it's got to go. And he didn't care what anybody else had to say. He broke it in pieces because he's the king. I'm like, that's pretty cool. Like, that's a, like, you feel that word? Like, that, I don't know. That's like a, like, I don't know. I'm just like impressed by the guts that took to do because, again, hundreds of years of tradition. And if you know anything about Jewish people, they're all about tradition. And like,
That would be like worse than, because I guess in Judah there wasn't like the bronze bull, the bulls.
Yeah.
But like
yeah.
the bulls were like, they were different because this was like something that God actually had commissioned at one point, whereas the bull wasn't.
Yeah.
But like, so to me this is even like stronger than tearing those down, because those were something that like they worshipped for a long time, but like that would have still caused a lot of like stirring.
Yeah, it's like deep down they knew that what they were doing was wrong, right? In this instance, it's like, no, God actually told us to make this, right? And like you, like it's like
our people.
Yeah, like it's like that's what's crazy. Like it really is like comparable to like the cross or the Shroud of Turin or something, where it's like, okay, like that, it's crazy, but I don't know. I think it's cool that he did that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it immediately follows us up, verse 5. He trusted in Yahweh, the God of Israel. That's just cool, right? That is just relieving to finally hear something like that. I'm trying to remember what the name Hezekiah means. Does anybody know off the top of their head? I should have looked this up.
Y'all something.
Yeah.
Hezekiah?
Yeah. It means Yahweh is my strength. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's from Chazak, which means to strengthen, and then Yah. Hezekiah. Okay, he trusted in Yahweh, the God of Israel. So that makes sense. The strength of Yahweh trusted in Yahweh, the God of Israel. So that after him there was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor among those who were before him.
That's a bold statement.
That is very high praise. So what's being communicated in that verse?
He was the best.
He was one of the best kings during that time.
He was the best.
Maybe I'm just forgetting. For some reason I feel like, oh nice.
Okay,
Gotta
keep
love Windows updates.
Why do I feel like this phrase is like a phrase that has been used before? I don't know if it was important or not, but there shall be none like you among all the kings, like before, after.
I feel like it
Wasn't
did.
that something he said to David?
I think it was. I think that's what it's alluding to. I'd have to look it up real quick, but I'm pretty confident that it was something that he said, like
I'm fairly positive.
in the covenant or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It might be 2 Samuel 7 or something like that.
That would make sense. I wasn't sure, because sometimes repeated phrases aren't like intentional. You know, it's like, but it looks familiar.
Yeah. Let me see. Cross references. It does seem like it mainly shows up in reference to Hezekiah. There's definitely a passage that's similar to that. I don't remember what it is. I have to look up. Like it's specifically that phrase, neither like no one before or afterwards. I'm actually a reference to Solomon.
I was gonna
With
say,
Solomon in regards to his wisdom.
I was thinking Solomon was my guess,
Yeah.
especially because the next verse it says he clung to Yahweh. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like whereas Solomon was described as like clinging to the form of him.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's what it probably is. It's an illusion because I think with Solomon it said, "I will make your wisdom to where like you'll be like wiser than anybody before you and after you, and there'll be nobody in comparison." So that would make sense to where it's like what we see here with Hezekiah is that an elevation, right? He's better even than Solomon. Because the thing that sets him apart is that he trusts in Yahweh, the God of Israel, right? To where that is like the one thing that's greater than wisdom.
And in a way, I think we talked about this with Solomon, how it was kind of like undoing the conquest, because they were like becoming like they were like re-Canaanizing almost.
Yeah.
Whereas the imagery here is of him like he took away the high places and shattered the pillars and cut down the Asherah. It is kind of like a reconquest of sorts.
Yes.
And so like it's almost like a undoing of what Solomon did.
So 2 Kings chapter 3 verse 12.
This is right after Solomon asked for wisdom, right?
Yeah. Behold, I have done according to your words. Behold, I have given you a wise and discerning heart, so that there has been no one like you before, nor shall one like you arise after you.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's definitely what it's probably alluding to there, because it's saying, oh, well, there is somebody better than Solomon. Hezekiah might not have the same wisdom as Solomon, but he has something that's better than wisdom, right?
Yeah.
He has a trust and devotion to Yahweh, which Solomon did not have. And that's why I think this is such a cool phrase, because, like, it's implied, like, whenever it says, there was none like him among all the kings of Judah, like, before him, like, specifically at the end there, I think that's talking about with the exception of David, right? So, like, David is obviously the exception because it's the one everybody's being compared to, but other than David, like, it's specifically talking about kings of Judah, so once the kingdom split.
Well, even David, didn't he, like, not tear down the high places? Were there any high places?
I don't
think there
were high places in his time.
I'm not sure that mentioned high places or not.
Yeah, that was something that mainly was started being mentioned once you get to Solomon's reign and in Kings and stuff like that. But this is specifically talking about kings of Judah. So once the kingdom is split, it says, no king before him was as good, nor was any king afterwards, which is pretty crazy because there is still going to be one more king of Judah after this who's going to be a pretty good king. But the author of 2 Kings is making his stance clear. He says, Hezekiah is the closest we've gotten to David in a while. And there's not going to be, like, this is a high point. And I like that you highlighted that it sounds like it's like a reconquest. You might be able to then understand why Judah is not going to be destroyed by Assyria, right? And you can also understand why, in a few verses, 2 Kings is going to line up with Isaiah. Because this is very crucial to Isaiah's message, right? Isaiah's been saying, trust in Yahweh, trust in Yahweh, trust in Yahweh. What does Hezekiah do? He trusts in Yahweh. But he's not going to be perfect, and he's going to make some mistakes, and therefore there are going to be long-term consequences, but not during Hezekiah's reign, right? If Hezekiah hadn't trusted in Yahweh, we'd probably have 2 red X's on the screen right here. But instead, we just have the northern kingdom falling, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so, just, I don't know, high praise. This is like really good stuff. Like, if your name's going to show up in the Bible, these are the types of verses that you want to accompany it, right? This is like a great epitaph to like have written on your tombstone, right? There's other people who it's like, maybe it would, like, you prefer to not be mentioned in the Bible, like what, like a Nabal or something like that.
Yeah.
But this, great. So he clung to Yahweh. I was wanting to do a little word study on the word clung there. It's the Hebrew word dabak. And it means to like cling or to stick or to like stay close.
Is it the same word that is used for Solomon?
That's what I was looking up. First off, it's the same word that's used in Genesis chapter 2. Whenever it says, a man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So that it's very strong language. It's like like literally oneness language. Like the idea of being so like that. It's like Psalm 27:4 language, right? One thing have I asked, to dwell in the house of the Lord. That's what Hezekiah is doing. Let's see. Hold up. Oh, Deuteronomy 30. I was hoping it was going to be Deuteronomy 32. But it says, by loving Yahweh your God, by listening to his voice, and by clinging to him. right? So it's talking about what, like God calls his people to cling to him. Once you get into 1 Kings chapter 11, yes, Solomon clung to these in love, talking about the foreign women. And then by contrast, the 2 Kings chapter 3, whenever it's talking about, I believe, Ahab, either that or one of Ahab's sons, it says he clung to the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Right? And so the kings of Israel loved clinging to the...
that would have been one of Ahab's sons.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because Ahab died at the end of 1
Ahab
Kings.
died.
Right, yeah. But yeah, so the kings of Israel loved clinging to the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Husbands cling to their wives. King Solomon clung to his foreign wives and led them into sin, and they led him into sin. But Hezekiah, he clung to Yahweh, which is what we should all do. Like if we were to make another Welsh shirt, that would be a great phrase, right? Like just like cling to Yahweh. There's some ideas. I probably need to get a job first. So he clung to Yahweh. He did not turn away from following him, but kept his commandments, which Yahweh had commanded Moses. I feel like right there, just verse 6 is a sermon. Like that's like a good 3-point sermon, or actually a 4-point sermon right there. Right? Cling to Yahweh. Don't turn away from following him. Keep his commandments. And then the fourth extra one would be what Yahweh commanded Moses, like basically study the Torah. Right, the enduring covenant there and stuff. So real quick, we gotta pick up the pace a little bit, but I just want to talk about those. What do those different things mean? They're all kind of different ways of saying the same thing, but what does each one individually mean? Because I feel like there's some good application that can come out of this.
Like verse 6?
Yeah. What does it mean to cling to Yahweh?
Stay close to him.
What does that mean?
Walk with him.
What does that mean?
That makes sense. Like be close to him, walk with him throughout life.
So you just gotta physically track him down and hold hands with him?
No, like seek him.
What does that
In
mean?
prayer.
Just in prayer?
No, by reading his word and praying.
Okay. Just by seeking his word, reading his word and praying?
No, the way you live your life shows that you're clean to Yahweh.
Okay.
One thing that was been highlighted throughout 2 Kings is the idea of like following the law, but also specifically worshiping Yahweh alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like not worshiping other gods, like not turning left nor right.
Yeah.
Not Yahweh plus other gods, but just Yahweh.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense if you think of it in terms of marriage, right? Whenever it says, man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, the idea is one wife for life, right? Like that's the goal, right? So if you cling to Yahweh, it's the idea of you're saying, you are my God and no other, right? It is the first commandment, right? You shall have no other gods before me. But the imagery of clinging is like...
It's like complete devotion.
Yeah, you're like holding on to him and like, even if Yahweh's trying to run away from you, you're holding onto his leg and following behind, right? You're like, no! Like you are fully devoted to him.
You're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Stay with me. Yeah.
Like we're talking about like Moses, how God described himself as the jealous God.
Yes.
Also, a point that Moses kind of showed with the whole like Exodus 32, 34 discourse when he said like that if God stayed, they would stay, but if God went, then they would go. The idea is like he understood that it was about clinging to God, not clinging to the promised land or whatever God had to offer.
Yeah, it's about being with God for the sake of being with God, right? It's similar to John chapter 6, whenever Jesus says to his disciples after everybody leaves, he says, do you want to go his way as well? And Peter says, to whom shall we go? Right? You have the words of life. They're like, no, we're sticking with you to the end. So the idea of clinging to Yahweh is being fully devoted to him, and that necessarily affects how you live, right? And that leads to the next things, right? He did not turn away from following him, but he kept his commandments, right? So we got a negative thing and a positive thing, and they're really different ways of, like, all three of these are communicating the same thing, right? If you want to know what it means to cling to Yahweh, you look at the next two things. One is saying what it doesn't look like, and one saying what it does look like, right? One thing is to say, he did not turn away from following him, okay? So that's the negative thing. But even then, it's still a little bit abstract, right? What does it mean to follow him, right? Because again, God is like he's invisible, he's spirit. You can't physically follow him. It's very different. Like when Jesus shows up, it says "follow me." He quite literally means physically follow me. But at this time here, they weren't physically following Yahweh. So the question becomes, okay, well, how do you follow him? Well, that leads to the third thing, right? Keeping his commandments. Which actually lines up with what Jesus says, right? He says, if you'll be my disciples, you'll keep my commandments. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments.
I don't know if that second part is necessarily... It doesn't seem negative to me. It almost seems like the second part of that about keeping his commandments is like he did this in addition to doing this, but I think they're both positive. Because it said he didn't... It seems like turning away from following God is the negative thing. But Hezekiah didn't do that.
Yeah, when I was saying negative, I wasn't saying like a bad thing. I was saying negative in the sense of like featuring the word not. If that makes sense. You know, like a negative command and a positive command. Like the bad thing to do would be turning away, so the negative thing is do not turn. Does that make sense?
Do not turn away.
Like if you're physically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I probably didn't word that correctly. So like he obeyed the prohibition correctly, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He did not turn away. What does it mean to not turn away? Well, it means that you keep his commandments, right? Because that's how you demonstrate you're not turning away, right? Because what is the very first commandment? Have no other gods before me.
Have no other gods before me.
And we spent plenty of time talking about this, but throughout, really, after the getting of the law, throughout the rest of the Old Testament, all 613 commands are basically boiled down to that first command. Because all of the rest of them flow from that first command. You shall have no other God before me. And if you have another God, it will necessarily lead you to violate the rest of them.
Can I break the Bible study? I gotta head out. I'm just checking my dad for
Okay, no problem.
See you. See you, George.
I'll see you, George. But yeah, so the way you don't turn away from him is by keeping his commands. And these specifically are the commands which Yahweh commanded Moses, right? So go back to the Torah, and we see that Hezekiah did a very good job of submitting to them, which is good, right? So in addition to all of his reforms, in addition to tearing everything down, he also did the positive thing of so he removed all the bad stuff and he instituted all the good stuff, right? Which is a total reformation. This is good stuff. Just round of applause for Hezekiah. Good job, dude. All right, we move on. Verses 7 through 12.
And Yahweh was with him. Wherever he went, he prospered. And he rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. He struck the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory, from watchtower to fortified city. Now in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against Samaria and besieged it. And at the end of 3 years, they captured it. In the 6th year of Hezekiah, which was the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel, Samaria was captured. Then the king of Assyria took Israel away into exile to Assyria, and put them in Halah and on the Habor, the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes, because they did not listen to the voice of Yahweh their God, but trespassed against this covenant, even all that Moses the servant of Yahweh commanded. They would neither listen nor do it.
Okay, so what do we see here?
Basically reaffirms the downfall of the northern kingdom.
Yeah, which is kind of funny because
it also gives the reasons.
Yeah, but if you remember back in chapter 17, which it's been a few weeks since we were in chapter 17, but in that chapter, it already was pretty adamant about how guilty Israel was for all that they had done, right? If you go back to 2 Kings 17, let me just flip to it real quick. It went on pretty long about, oh yeah, Israel, they got exactly what was coming for them. Literally verses 7 through 23 are basically just talking about oh yeah, they got what was coming for them. They got what they deserved. And now we just get it again to where you get the author, he's giving a warning. And I think it's understandable why he reiterates it at this point right here. We will talk about that in a second though. So verses 7 and 8. And Yahweh was with him. Hey, what does that sound like?
Yahweh was with him.
A name.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be Emmanuel. It'd be more like Emmanuel. Right? Emmanuel means God with us. Emmanuel Yahweh, I guess. Name your kid that. I'll look up what the actual Hebrew is there.
I was thinking of Joshua. Because he said, "Be strong and courageous. Be not afraid. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." when they were going into the land.
Yeah, but why would I think this phrase is significant right here?
Because he obeyed God. He was faithful to him. He didn't turn away from following him. So God was with him. Yahweh was with him. And he prospered.
Yeah, but in the context of what we've been talking about in Isaiah, why is this significant? So what was like the standout feature that we saw about Hezekiah, right? So it was sandwiched in between. So like in the previous slide, there were all the things that he tore down, and there were all the things that he built up, and sandwiched in between there was this one statement about Hezekiah. What did it say that he did?
He trusted Yahweh.
He trusted in Yahweh. As a result, what do we read in verse 7?
Yahweh's with him.
Yahweh was with him. What has Isaiah been telling everybody to do for the last 35 chapters of Isaiah?
Trust in Yahweh.
Trust in Yahweh. And he says, if you trust in Yahweh, Emmanuel, God will be with you. Right? Like that's the whole point. Right? And so, right here again, you can see why the books of Isaiah and 2 Kings are about to intersect. Because what the author of 2 Kings is arguing is very similar to what the author of Isaiah is arguing as well. Right? So they're on a crash course about to just crash into each other. And Yahweh was with him. Wherever he went, he prospered. Hey, not only does that tie into Isaiah, that also ties into Moses. Right? What did Moses say back in Deuteronomy? If you hear my words and obey them, you will prosper. Well, Hezekiah heard and obeyed. He's prospering. And he rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. All right.
Great stuff.
That's actually good stuff.
Yes.
Whereas the king of Israel also rebelled against Assyria, didn't go so hot for him. He struck the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory, from watchtower to fortified city. Who does this kind of sound like a little bit?
Like David.
It sounds like David, right? It's supposed to make you think of David. Because David is the Philistine slayer, the giant killer. David is the conquering king who leads the people to worship God. And now, Hezekiah has become like that, which is really cool. I did look up that phrase, by the way, and the Lord was with him. It is Haya Yahweh Imu, right? So that Imu is the same as like Emmanuel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing, but it's Yahweh Imu, which is an even funnier name for your kid. Yahweh Imu. Anyways. So we're talking about Hezekiah, and then in the middle of all that, we jump back to talk about Israel again. Now, in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, the son of Elah, king of Israel, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against Samaria and besieged it. And you're asking yourself, why the heck are we repeating this? We already talked about this in chapter 17. Keep reading. And at the end of 3 years, they captured it. In the 6th year of Hezekiah, which was the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel, Samaria was captured. Alright? Again, we've already read all this stuff. Mm-hmm. Then the king of Assyria took Israel away into exile to Assyria and put them in Halah and on the Habor, the river of Gozan, in the cities of the Medes. Because they did not listen to the voice of Yahweh their God, but trespassed against his covenant, even all that Moses the servant of Yahweh commanded, they would neither listen nor do it. Alright, so, what, according to the author of 2 Kings, what was the main reason why Israel was exiled?
Because they kept on being rebellious and disobedient.
Yeah, they kept rebelling against the word of God. Alright, well what has Hezekiah been doing?
Obeying.
He's been obeying, and he's been prospering. And so this is why the author feels the need to highlight this here. Or actually, rather than me giving my answer, let me ask you, why do y'all think that the author feels the need to highlight this at this exact moment? Is it just because he wanted you to be like, hey, chronologically, this is where it took place?
Deuteronomy 32.
I wasn't going to bring up Deuteronomy 32, but...
No, I mean, it works, right? Essentially what Deuteronomy boils down to is like you follow God, good things happen. You don't follow God, bad things happen.
True, that's part of it, but I'm specifically talking about why it shows up here in the text.
Okay.
Yeah. But I do appreciate bringing up Deuteronomy 32 at all times. Nick, were you going to say something?
No, I was just saying that it serves as like a good point of contrast.
Yeah, so there's the contrast, and I think this also serves a little bit as a warning to Hezekiah. Right? It says, hey, Hezekiah, you don't want to be like them, do you? Notice the big difference. Right? The big difference is that they are currently not serving the Lord. You are. And so, if you want to last, put your trust in Yahweh.
Yeah, it kind of made me think, because it's like all this good stuff, and it says that God's with him, it's like almost like a height of prosperity, and then it jumps into that. It made me kind of think of a Solomon. Like, whenever he got to like the height of his prosperity, that's when God came to him and warned him.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and yeah, I can see that, to where you're talking about like right after Solomon finished the temple, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so Solomon had just finished building the temple, and basically he'd done all this stuff, and there was like this big moment, and God shows up and says, all right, be careful. Make sure you don't go astray. Yeah, I can totally see that being a possibility here. But then also just keep in mind that Judah and Israel aren't big, right? They're very small, and this is like the Assyrian Empire is actually like a pretty huge development in like the grand scheme of like history, because it's one of the first like legitimate empires that we see like in the story, right? I mean, like the only comparable thing is like Egypt, I guess, thus far, at least in this area of the world, to where like the Assyria's power is genuinely unparalleled compared to anything we've seen so far. And so here you've got Hezekiah, who is prospering, and then he learns that his neighbors directly to the north were just destroyed. Not just like subdued, destroyed. And the people were taken into exile. This would be pretty sobering to Hezekiah, be like, oh, crud, how do I make sure I don't do what they did? Well, there's one key difference. They did not follow Yahweh. And so as long as Hezekiah follows Yahweh, he should be good. Right? That seems to be the main message there. Right? And that's, or at the very least, that is what the author of Kings is communicating to us. Right? Because again, verses 9 through 12 don't really introduce anything that we haven't already read in chapter 17. Right? We already read all the reasons why Israel is sent into captivity. But the author feels the need to reiterate it as a point of contrast. Hey, Hezekiah is doing great, and during his reign, as he's prospering, this stuff goes down. The main difference? They didn't trust in Yahweh. And that is the perfect setup, because guess what? Verse 13 is where we start lining up with Isaiah, right? Because if you look at 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 13, it reads, now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and seized them. If you flip to Isaiah chapter 36, verse 1, you read, now it happened in the 14th year of King Hezekiah that Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and seized them. Right? So, starting with this verse, the two books become one and the same. Which I just think is very interesting, right? And in 2 Kings, what's cool about it is that they have the same agenda, right? If you go back, verses 9 through 12 here basically serve the same purpose, I would argue, as Isaiah chapters 1 through 35, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Right? Isaiah 1 through 35 is basically the prophet confronting the people of Judah and saying, you need to trust in God, and if you don't, bad things are going to happen. Well, that's exactly what the author of 2 Kings is writing to his audience. But he just does it in a much shorter form, if that makes sense. Right? Mm-hmm. And so, right here, they converge, and all of a sudden, we're reading the same story. I just think that's kind of cool. Anyways, Sean, can you read those verses for us?
Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and seized them. Then Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, I have done wrong. Turn away from me. Whatever penalty you give to me, I will bear. So the king of Assyria set a penalty on Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. Thus Hezekiah gave him all the silver which was found in the house of Yahweh and in the treasuries of the king's house. At that time Hezekiah cut off the gold from the doors of the temple of Yahweh and from the doorposts which Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Assyria.
I think we see a uh-oh.
Yeah, I'd say we see a little bit of an uh-oh in this part. So, I mentioned this before. Hezekiah is a great king, but he's far from a perfect king. Right? There's going to be some mess-ups he makes here. And I think to a degree, his mess ups are kind of understandable, just because given the extreme situation he's in. The good thing is that it's not going to end with a mess up, which is good. But can somebody summarize what we see happening here?
So basically, the king of Syria seizes all of Judah, and then
Is this getting close to the Babylon captivity?
Not
I
yet.
think.
no.
Oh no,
So
it's at the end. Yeah.
That's still
So,
150
he was
years.
afraid for his life, and he's like saying, "I have to."
I mean, at this time, Assyria also captured Babylon, so Babylon didn't even really exist.
Yeah.
In its current state.
What were we gonna say?
We've got a few more years.
And I was gonna say basically like, confess. He's like, "Look, I've done wrong here. Whatever you want, I'll give it up." So essentially, I don't even really think the Assyrian king makes demands. Hezekiah just like gives it all up and it's like, "Here, you want it, you can have it. Don't come down here and try to destroy what I got going on."
He's like, "Don't mess with me, bro."
Yeah.
Or I don't mess with you.
It's like a fight that he recognized he was losing, so he's like, okay, I'll give you tribute.
Yeah, yeah. So there's definitely a lapse in trust in this moment. So let's walk through it. Oh, sorry. Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities in Judah and seized them. I don't remember the exact year that this takes place, but assuming, like if we were to assume that Hezekiah's co-regency started in like 729 BC, that would say that this would be what says the 14th year, so that'd be what, 715 BC? Is that correct?
Yeah.
So, according to the world's most trusted source, Wikipedia, Sennacherib reigned from 705 to 681 BC. 705 to 681.
Okay.
So, if it were to happen, it would have happened somewhere in that time. I'm guessing if Hezekiah's reign on the timeline is right, then it happened in 702.
Yeah, so according to most sources, the Assyrian siege of Jerusalem was in 701 BC. So, yeah. Again, the years on this are just very confusing.
It's not an important thing, but I saw Lachish. Is this the same event? There's like a whole like inscription, like a stele, or whatever about.
I believe so. Yes, because because there, I forget what it's called, but what's interesting about this story is that I do know that there is an Assyrian record that recounts that they laid siege to Jerusalem, and they even acknowledge the fact, like they acknowledge that they conquered most of Judah. I think it says like 42 cities or something like that. But they even admit that they did not conquer Jerusalem, but their version of how the story ends is very different than the biblical version. I have to look it up. I'll try to remember to look it up for another week. Because this story is going to kind of end like halfway through the story. But what ends up happening is that, spoiler alert, by the one day they're going to just like come out and the Syrian army is just going to be gone. And there's no explanation given. Whereas I believe according to the Assyrian account, and again, I have to look it up to make sure, I'm pretty sure it says that they went down to Egypt and that there was like a mice infestation or like to where a bunch of people got sick and they had to flee and go back home. And honestly, both of those could be true at the same time. To where the Bible doesn't necessarily suggest, like, I don't know, there's some weird stuff going on there, but I believe that if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's some kind of Assyrian account of like a siege.
Yes.
I think it was Lachish.
Yeah. And then there's also another character named Shebna who shows up in this, who is mentioned in Isaiah, but we also have an inscription that might be a reference to Shebna's tomb. So there's a lot of cool archaeology that comes in regards to this stuff. So yeah, in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities in Judah and seized them. So right off the bat, that's scary as heck, right? And you can see why Hezekiah is going to be shaking in his sandals here, because it says that he just came and seized them, right? They're like, here Hezekiah he's prospering, everything's going great, and this Assyrian power just comes in and conquers all the cities. And it's like, oh crud. Like, that was unexpected, right? Like, here you like literally in the previous verses, Hezekiah, he's wiping people out, he's destroying the Philistines, he's doing all this great stuff, and then all of a sudden, some random dude from the north shows up and boom, boom, boom. He destroys the northern kingdom, he comes down, he conquers most of Judah, and Hezekiah's like, what just happened? Right? Like, that's terrifying. Then Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, I have done wrong. Turn away from me. Whatever penalty you give to me, I will bear. So what's he say?
He's like, I'll give you what you asked.
Yes. He's like,
What's wrong? I'll give you
dude,
that.
just take whatever you want. Yeah. He's like, just whatever I have to do to get you to leave, I'll do it. Like, just if you want money, take it. Like, I am your leash, right? Just do whatever you want. Just please let me get out of here. I just realized that the camera had turned off for a second. I don't know why that was. Interesting. So, the king of Assyria set a penalty on Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold.
Ooh, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, I don't know what the equivalent would be, but I imagine it's several $1 million worth of money. Which at this point, he's like, take it, I don't care, right? He's like, yeah, that's fine, just please leave me alone. But then we get this part, verse 15. Thus Hezekiah gave him all the silver which was found in the house of Yahweh, and in the treasuries of the king's house. Now, who does this sound like?
The king's house.
King, there was another king who did this. I can't remember his name. Wasn't he like a good king, and then he... I can't remember the exact story, but I have to find it. This is killing me.
I think there's been several kings who have done stuff like this so far. They've all been kings of Judah because they always take the stuff out of the temple, which is like annoying. I forget which king it is as well. Sorry, I was wanting to look up the thing we were just talking about with the inscription. But yeah. So long story short, is what Hezekiah is doing here, is it good or bad? Bad. Yeah. He's but again, even though it's bad, you can see why he's doing it from a political perspective, right?
The one that I think it's most like is Jehoash or
Jehoash. Remind me, is that the king who was like doing a really good job until his like the priest dude died?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and then that's one. I think that's what I'm thinking of, because he was like doing
Jehoiada.
Jehoiada?
Yeah.
Jehoiada the priest.
And
Jehoiada.
then
Yeah.
priest died, and he gave up like all the gold in the house of Yahweh for no reason.
Yeah. Was he giving it? Who was he giving it to?
Hazael.
Oh, the Arameans.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and so you can see why Hezekiah does this, because these are the people who destroyed the Arameans, right? They destroyed Syria. They destroyed Israel. From Hezekiah's perspective, like, he might even be tempted to believe that God has failed, right? Because Israel has fallen, most of Judah has fallen, and so while what Hezekiah is doing is bad, I also probably empathize with him more than like people like Jehoash, right? Because Jehoash, he was just never truly devoted to God, right? Like, he was just basically living off of his father figure's faith. And then once Jehoiada died, Jehoash just kind of lost faith altogether, really.
Well, I'm pretty sure Jehoash was the 7-year-old king.
Oh yes, yeah, because he was just raised up there and didn't really do a whole lot. But with Hezekiah, again, what he's doing is still wrong. I don't want to downplay that, but I think the reason why I'm trying to highlight how difficult his decision was is because I'm trying to highlight the level of faith to which the Bible is calling us, right? Because he is being put in a very difficult political situation here, right? To where everybody else has fallen so far. Israel itself has fallen, the northern kingdom, which also, mind you, is the chosen people of God. They have been marched off into exile 20 years earlier at this point, right? So he's had 2 decades to reflect on this. And now, here Sennacherib is, he's come in, he's taken a lot of their cities, and Hezekiah is just trying to get him to leave. he says, what do you want? And the guy says, I'll take money. And so Hezekiah says, okay, fine, we can do that. Right? And should he have done it this way? Probably not. But from his perspective, he might have even been able to justify it as this was an act of faith. Right? You know what? I'm going to trust that God will provide even if I strip all this stuff down. Right? I don't know. Right? I can't speak on behalf of Hezekiah. I don't think he should have done this. And I think that the author would agree because I think he's intentionally, like, he's detailing the things that Hezekiah did that are similar to kings that were portrayed in a negative light. So he gave him all the silver which was found in the house of Yahweh and in the treasuries of the king's house. That's the sad, just like the cyclical nature of this whole story is that Israel keeps prospering whenever they worship God, and then whenever they lose their trust in God, the first thing they do is they start stripping they take all the money and give it away. And then verse 16 is even more depressing. At that time Hezekiah cut off the gold from the doors of the temple of Yahweh and from the doorposts, which Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid and gave it to the king of Assyria. Like, this is almost humiliating, right? Like, here you've got this amazing temple, like it's Solomon's temple, right? It's supposed to be like the most beautiful place. And not only are you taking the gold from within, but that's something like that people couldn't see, right? People couldn't see the gold sitting inside there, right? But still, the temple itself was a sight to behold. But now they're going to the doors themselves, which are overlaid in gold, and he's having to get somebody to just like chip away from it. And I almost feel like symbolically, this represents what is happening to religion in Israel, right? Like, it's like literally it's just deteriorating, right? To where the temple that was once like renowned for its glory is now just like it's empty of wealth both inside and also externally, right? To where the doors don't even gleam anymore.
God's removing his external protection, and now we're seeing for what it really is.
Yeah, look at that. Yes, very good, Sean. Yeah, no, that's exactly what's happening here, and it's just sad because again, Hezekiah is a good king who goes down as being the best king since David, which is crazy because that's also probably even being elevated even over Solomon. But still, he's not perfect, and during his time period, like, I don't know, I just find it very humiliating, like the idea of like hiring people, all right, go chip away the gold on the doors. Like, that's just like, it's like, this is worse. Like there's something about that that's just very embarrassing. Want to read verses 17 through 18 for us?
Then the king of Assyria sent Tartan and Rabsaris and Rabshakeh from Lachish to King Hezekiah with a heavy military force to Jerusalem. So they went up and came to Jerusalem. And when they went up, they came and stood by the conduit of the upper pool, which is on the highway of the fuller's field. Then they called to the king, and Eliakim the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah the son of Asaph, the recorder, came out to them.
Alrighty. So,
what I'm getting at here is the king of Assyria.
He just sent a bunch of generals.
He just sent a bunch of, like, a huge military force there, and in verse 18, they're calling out to the king, and essentially a scribe's coming out. And essentially just the king's finding out about it, and then he's going to send his response. And you're wondering, like, why the heck are these guys here? What's about to go down? Yeah.
So this is where things basically go from bad to worse. Because formerly, it was like, what? Like at the end of, in verse 16, it was, he was sending them the money, right? So if you just go back to the previous thing, right? So he gave them all the money, and at that time, he cut all the stuff, and he gave it to the king, and so ideally, that means that everything should be behind them, right? Oh yeah, everything's in the past now. If only it were that easy. We get to verse 17. Then the king of Assyria sent Tartan and Rabsaris and Rabshakeh from Lachish to King Hezekiah with a heavy military force to Jerusalem. Right? So already a bunch of the cities had been seized and captured, and now all of a sudden there is a military force surrounding the capital city. And this is where Hezekiah is probably thinking, wait, hold up. But I gave you all that money. Why aren't you leaving? And he's like, oh, I never said I was going to leave. You just offered me money, and I said, okay. So again, things go from bad to worse. Because now the king and the entire capital, like basically it seems like Judah has been reduced to this one city, right? They're just down to the capital city, which is the most important city. And this is a huge moment. All those different titles, just so you know, those are just like royal titles. Like those are not names. Like Tartan, I believe that it might even tell us like what the names actually mean.
Well, I know that like the kings of Assyria had multiple titles. They were like king of the universe, king of the four corners of the world.
Yeah.
Like it's
but like so the term Tartan, like that's just a reference to like a field marshal. Rab Sadis, it's like the chief eunuch. And then the Rab Shaka, that means like the chief cupbearer. Right? So they're just servants of the king, right? They're just like they're important people. And so
Is
they're
there,
the
like in verse 18, those people?
What's that?
Like, is it just kind of the counterpart to like in verse 18 who comes?
Yes. Yeah. So basically, it's just like they're both sending like delegates out there to like
envoys.
Just to talk. Yeah. So the king of Assyria, he sends these people there. So they went and came up to Jerusalem, and when they went up, they came and stood by the conduit of the upper pool, which is on the highway of the Fuller's Field. If only we knew where that was. Was that?
I said that is a strange detail to include.
Yeah. I imagine that to the ancient, like to the original audience, they probably knew exactly where this was, and it was like, oh, I can. It's like they can probably imagine it. And I'm trying to remember. This might be the same place where Isaiah met with Ahaz in Isaiah chapter 7. Now it happened in the days of Ahaz, king of Judah, and Rezin, king of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up to Jerusalem to wage war against it. Yahweh said to Ahaz, "Go meet Ahaz, you and your son, Shir-Jashub, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the Fuller's Field."
So it's kind of like a meeting place.
Yeah. So this just seems to be a regular place for people to meet up. This is where Isaiah confronted Ahaz decades earlier, and now these people are coming to meet as well. And when they went up, they came and stood by the conduit of the upper pool, which is on the highway to the Fuller's Field. Then they called to the king, Hezekiah, and Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder, came out to them. To me, something about it feels like an old Western movie, where it's like just like three guys like all walking out there.
No,
What's that?
It's like Tombstone.
Like Tombstone, yeah. They're just all like standing there facing to each other. It's like, I'll be your Huckleberry. So I do want to mention again, Shebna, he is mentioned elsewhere. I believe it's in the book of Isaiah, even though his name might be spelled a little bit different. So I don't know if it'll come up. Let me see. Yeah, no, he's mentioned in Isaiah chapter 22 and 36. So he's mentioned in Isaiah 22 because I believe that he actually has like a bad reputation.
In whose eyes?
In God's eyes.
Oh.
Like I'm pretty sure he says, I think we talked about it before. Isaiah 22:15. It says, "Thus says Lord Yahweh of hosts, come, go to this steward, to Shebna, who is in charge of the royal household. What right do you have here? And whom do you have here? That you have hewn a tomb for yourself here, you who hew a tomb on the height, you who carve a dwelling place for yourself in the cliff. Behold, Yahweh is about to hurl you headlong, O man, and he is about to grasp you firmly." So basically, Shebna had the reputation of basically using his power and influence to like treat himself. And basically, he had made this super fancy tomb for himself. And God says, "Oh, you want a fancy tomb? Well, I'll make sure you get to use it soon." And then it says, "Then it will be in that day that I will summon my servant Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, and I will clothe him with your tunic." So God says that he's going to replace Shebna with Eliakim, and Eliakim is also mentioned here. Right? And so it seems like there was actually some behind-the-scenes drama that isn't even mentioned in 2 Kings, but it is mentioned in Isaiah. And the main reason I mention that is because there is a... archaeologically, there is a Shebna, a thing that's called the Shebna inscription. It's technically called the Royal Steward inscription, but also known as the Shebna inscription. And it dates to this time period, and it was discovered just outside the city of Jerusalem. And I'm trying to figure out, remember what the inscription says. It says, "This is so-and-so, the royal steward. There is no silver or gold here, only blank, 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 and the bones of his maidservant with him. Cursed be the man who opens it." Basically, it's just a very elaborate and unnecessary tomb for people living in this time period. Because usually the priority would be I don't know, people are dying and like your nation is crumbling. Maybe don't spend all your money on like fancy tombs. And that's exactly what Isaiah was criticizing him for, right? He said, you stupid royal steward, why are you spending so much money on a tomb? As a result, God's going to give you, like, since you're so focused on serving yourself, God's going to give your spot to somebody else. And so what's cool is that we seem to have actually found that in Scripture. Kind of neat. But anyways, that's not necessarily important to what we're currently going through. I just wanted to mention that too. Long story short, right now, 3 Assyrians, 3 Israelites, they're coming and facing each other, and they are about to talk about what needs to happen in order for there to be peace. Verses 19 to 25.
Then Rabshakeh said to them, Say now to Hezekiah, Thus says the great king, the king of Assyria, What is this trust that you have? You say, but they are only empty words, I have counsel and might for the war. Now on whom do you trust, that you have rebelled against me? Now behold, you trust in the staff of this crushed reed, even on Egypt, on which if a man leans, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who trust in him. But if you say to me, We trust in Yahweh our God, is it not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah has taken away, and has said to Judah and to Jerusalem, You shall worship before this altar in Jerusalem? So now, come, make a bargain with my master the king of Assyria, and I will give you 2,000 horses, if you are able on your part to give riders for them. How then can you turn away one official of the least of my master's servants, and trust in Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? So now, have I come up without the approval of Yahweh against this place to make it a ruin? Yahweh said to me, Go up against this land and make it a ruin.
Cool.
Ooh.
So I'm not going to lie to you, these verses to me are some of the most intriguing, or I could say this is one of the most intriguing speeches to me in the Bible. Because so much of what he says here is wrong, and he's just blowing smoke, but then there's some places where he like stumbles upon the truth, or there's some places where like he kind of knows what he's talking about, but he gets a few details wrong. Like this is just a politician just like trying to sound tough. But there's so much going on here. Like I think that like this one speech right here highlights the complexity of like Jewish theology and politics, and also just like the story we've read in Kings so far. Like I don't know, like there's a lot to talk about in these verses right here, which I just think are fascinating. And I think it's cool that it's both in 2 Kings and Isaiah. So it's like it's almost like the Bible agrees. It's like, yeah, let's talk about what Rabshakeh said. But long story short, what does he say?
He's saying if you go to Egypt, they're going to stab you in the back. So there's that.
Which sounds a little bit like what Isaiah said.
Yeah.
Right? Like Isaiah says, don't go down to Egypt. Okay, sorry, continue.
So there's that, and he's like, well, the God you serve, what are you going to do? You're going to ask him, you just stripped all the gold and gave it to us. Mm-hmm. So the Assyrians are saying he's essentially going to be a no use. Even if you repent, he's not going to do anything. He's abandoned you. Your God's abandoned you. And then he says, well, even without consulting your God's going to agree with me and say, go conquer the land of Israel. Yeah.
So again, there's so many things in here which are just strange, because on one hand he says, don't trust in Egypt because they can't help you. And God says, amen. And then he also says, also, by the way, God sent me here. To which we would also say, amen? Question mark? Because that's the last part right there. We'll talk about it when we get there. When he says, Yahweh said to me, go against this land and make it a ruin, the question becomes, like we know theologically that technically God did send Assyria for this moment, right? The question becomes whether or not they were that aware of it, right? Yeah. To me, this just sounds like a politician trying to like talk big. But what's funny is that he stumbled upon the truth. Like that's what's crazy. And there's just so many other things along the way. So let's just walk through it because I just find this fascinating. Then Rabshakeh said to them, "Say now to Hezekiah, thus says the great king." First off, do you notice how does Rabshakeh address Hezekiah?
By his first name.
Yeah,
Doesn't even use title or anything.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Rabshakeh, he is not a king. He is a servant. You would think that he would show the common courtesy of, say this to your king. Say this to Hezekiah. Thus says the great king, the king of Assyria. He doesn't even say Sennacherib's name. right? It is too holy for him to say from his lips. He just calls him the great king, the king of Assyria. As for Hezekiah, go say to Hezekiah. So just from the beginning, you can tell, all right, this guy, he thinks he's tough.
Yes.
What is this trust that you have? Specifically, so whenever it says, whenever he asks this, who does he imply that they're trusting?
This guy, like God, maybe?
Maybe.
Maybe trust in his army and forces.
Yeah. Or Egypt, right? Or really, there's like the three options, right? It's either they're trusting in Yahweh, they're trusting in Egypt, or they're trusting in themselves. And really, I think it'll be fleshed out as you go. But long story short, it's that apparently, whenever they got there, they realized that the Israelites didn't seem as scared as they expected them to, right? Normally, people will be shaking in their boots, whereas for some reason, Hezekiah's men come out looking pretty confident. They're like, what is this trust you have? Right? He's like, yeah, okay. What is this trust that you have? You say, but they are only empty words, I have counsel and might for the war. Now on whom do you trust that you have rebelled against me? So...
He wants the attention, doesn't he?
What do you mean?
Well, he said, what is this trust that you have, and that you have rebelled against
It's like,
me?
how can you have such a strong trust? Look around you.
Yeah, he's saying, do you realize how much power we have? He says, we are the Assyrian Empire. Who could you possibly trust that could take on us? And that's going to be something that you notice with Rabshakeh's speech. He's very confident in Assyria's power. And you know what? Rightfully so. Because so far, Assyria has not really faced any pushback. Everywhere they've gone, they have conquered.
Now, is this Rabshakeh himself speaking, or is this Sennacherib speaking through Rabshakeh?
He's speaking on behalf of Sennacherib. But yeah, like, so it's, I guess I'm kind of, like, it's almost like a prophet, right? Like, it's like, it's both speaking. Yeah, so they're totally confident, right? And rightfully so. Yes, this is kind of just how, like, battles go anyways. Like, I mean, like, you ever seen, like, two UFC fighters, like, at weigh-ins? Right? You know, like, they weigh in, they're all on each other's face, like, I'm gonna mess you up, I'm gonna mess you up. Like, they're all just, like, talking smack, right? That's what's going on here. And Rob's like, man, why aren't you quivering in your boots? You sure seem to think that you got something up your sleeve. You think you can take on us? You ain't got nothing to take on us. Like, that's what he's saying. Right? You say, but they're only empty words. I have counsel and might for war. Yeah, so it's like, oh, you seem to think that you got something that's, you know, you either got like some wisdom or some strength that we don't know of because I ain't seeing it. Looks like y'all are just a city and we got you surrounded. Now, on whom do you trust that you have rebelled against me? Because remember, it said that Hezekiah rebelled against him, and then Hezekiah tried to buy him off and get him to go away. It did not work. Right? Now, behold, you trust in the staff of this crushed reed, even on Egypt, on which if a man leans, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who trust in him. So what is the imagery he uses there to convey his point?
This crushed reed.
It's basically like it's an unstable plant. Like, you can't really lean against a reed.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that the specific reed he's talking about has like sharp points, where if you were to put your hand on it, you would get pierced.
Well, I think it's the idea that it's so undependable that it'll just snap under pressure and it'll result in a sharp point. That the moment you try to
like a walking stick.
Yeah, it's where it's like this is actually very similar. This just seems to be like common language at this time period, especially when you think of Egypt. But whenever people come and ask about John the Baptist, whenever they come to Jesus, Jesus says, "Whenever you went to the wilderness, what were you looking for? A reed shaking in the wind?" Right? Reeds, they're just plants that like grow out by the water, and they're not good walking sticks, right? They're literally just flimsy things, right? They just blow in the wind, and they're not dependable at all. And specifically down in Egypt, there were a bunch of reeds, right? There's literally, according to the Bible, whenever the Israelites left Egypt, they went through the Sea of Reeds. We usually translate it as the Red Sea, but technically the literal translation is it's Yam Suf, I believe, like the Sea of Reeds. And so he kind of used that imagery. He says, that's all Egypt is. They're just reeds, right? And they're a broken reed, right? The staff is crushed reed. If you lean on it, it's going to pierce your hand, right? You'll try, but it's actually going to cause you more harm than good, right? If you're choosing between like going with a reed as a walking stick versus no walking stick, just go without a walking stick because you're just going to harm yourself. You're going to end up with all these splinters and things going to pierce you through the hand, and it's not going to help you out at all. So that's what he's saying with Egypt. He says, if you're putting your trust down on the people down south, they're not going to be able to help you because they're basically going to just ultimately they'll destroy you and they won't be able to give you the things that you want. So is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who trust in him. But if you say to me, we trust in Yahweh our God, is it not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah has taken away? And has said to Judah and Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar in Jerusalem?
He says that like it's a bad thing, but God likes that Hezekiah does that.
Like, I guess part of it also shows like how people on like outside. We talked about this even with like the Philistines before in 1 Samuel, but like it does show like how other people perceived the Israelites.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I guess like in a bad way. Like if they were worshiping this way for so long, they thought that was like almost how it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So that when they took those things away, it was actually a good thing. They were like, so you just like pissed off your God, and now he's sending us to punish you for it, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's because you're so used to worshiping these polytheistic gods. Like, for example, let's take Greek god Zeus, right? It's like you do something to his temple, altar, whatever. According to Greek mythology, he's going to get ticked off and zap you with lightning.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like basically this dude received bad intel, right? He doesn't understand the Jewish religion. He understands the perverted version of the Jewish religion that had been practiced for several centuries, right? To where there were altars and high places, and we talked about the fact that many of these altars and high places were probably dedicated to Yahweh, right? Because it seems like the Northern Kingdom, they fell into a lot of idolatry, and the Southern Kingdom did as well. But even before they fell into idolatry, they also had just begun worshiping God in places.
Altars where they shouldn't have been.
Yeah, they were basically just trying to make it a religion of convenience, right? Which is what we do a lot of times too. We just try to make religion more convenient for us, which is a whole other thing we can talk about. But and it seems like from an outsider looking in, Assyria, they are they are polytheists, right? They have a lot of different gods, and from their perspective, there isn't just one place to worship the gods. You worship it wherever. And so from his perspective, he just hears that there's this king that was tearing down a bunch of temples and altars to their god, and he's like, why the heck would Yahweh help you? It sounds like your king is like nuts. Whereas in reality, the king was actually doing exactly what God wanted, right? Because God only wanted them to worship in Jerusalem, right? That was where he chose for his name to dwell. But from a polytheistic perspective and just from a pagan perspective, he just doesn't get it, which also should convict us. Because on one hand, it's easy for us to laugh and say, oh, silly Sennacherib, you should have known better. How could he have? Right? Israel and Judah had failed to set a good standard. Right? They had failed to give glory to God's name, and they had failed to demonstrate what true religion looked like. And so you can see, like it works out for them that God is not mad at them, and God is actually pleased with them in this moment. But if Israel exists to be a light to the Gentiles, this should be concerning to us. Because it shows that the Gentiles are no more in the light that, from a Gentile perspective, the Israelites were no different than them. They're like, well, this is how it works with us. Why doesn't it work differently with, like they're just assuming that Judah is another nation, like another pagan nation. Mm-hmm. And that's something we should be concerned about as well, right? To where we got to realize that other people's false understandings of Christianity, we can't just blame them for not doing their homework. A lot of times that might fall on us because we have failed to accurately represent God. To quote like Romans 2, Paul actually quotes the Septuagint version of Isaiah, I believe, where it says, because of you, God is blasphemed amongst the Gentiles. Mm-hmm. Right? To where he's basically saying that the Jewish people had failed to give God the honor and glory he deserved, and therefore, Gentiles rejecting Yahweh was actually, in many ways, the Jewish people's fault. Because they had failed to actually follow his standard, right? If that's what they existed for, then you can't just blame the Gentiles. Yes, they are to blame, but those who teach will be judged more strictly, yes. Right? And same thing's true with us Christians, right? We can't just blame non-Christians and say, oh, well, they just love their sin too much. Maybe they did love their sin too much, but you really can't just say that until you make sure that you have done everything on your part to set a good example, right? So if you are so focused on studying the Word that you're not going out and loving others, well, guess what? You have failed to set a good example of Christianity, right? And if you only love people who think like you, if you only love people who look like you, if you only love people who have the same values as you, you have failed to set a good example of Christianity. If you only love people who benefit you, if you only love people who, or it's convenient to you to love, bad example. And so, yes, are non-Christians responsible for rejecting God? Absolutely. But you might share in that responsibility because you have failed to actually demonstrate what following God genuinely looks like.
It's like we talk about in 1 Peter, like keeping our conduct excellent among the
Uh-huh.
Gentiles.
Yeah.
If they do reject God and they do lash out against us, it shouldn't be anything on our part,
Yeah.
and it should be that either, like, if they're doing that, then they'll answer for it because they have, in spite of, like, basically being treated right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because even to go back to this, like based on kind of what you're saying there, in many ways, you kind of got to feel bad for Sennacherib because he is just waltzing into a situation that he should be very scared of. Because he's over here thinking, oh, they just pissed their God off, right? Like, he's mad. Whereas, like, in reality, he should realize, actually, for the first time in generations, they have made their God very happy. And he should realize, maybe I shouldn't be so confident. But because they have failed to actually show what it looks like to follow Yahweh, he doesn't realize the danger he's walking into, right? And so that actually is a problem, because, like, maybe he would have been more sober-minded in his approach to this if he had understood. But they just never gave him that understanding. Which is sad, right? They're the bad guys in the story, but you also feel kind of bad for them, because you're like, oh, like, wouldn't it have been great if you had just known better that Israel was supposed to be holy? But if you say to me, we trust in Yahweh our God, is it not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah has taken away? And it said to Judah and Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar in Jerusalem? So now come, make a bargain with my master, the king of Assyria, and I will give you 2,000 horses if you are able on your part to give riders for them.
Dang.
Wow.
That's crazy.
What's
I
crazy?
just realized how crazy that statement is in hindsight. He's basically saying, if you can muster up enough people to ride on these horses, go ahead and take them.
Yeah.
As if he's suggesting, like, Assyria, when they conquer Jerusalem, they're not giving them horses as, like, a charity to them. They're giving them horses so they can run away.
Yeah.
And, like, flee. But he's saying that Assyria is not even going to leave 2,000 people alive.
He's like, we'll give you as many horses as you need. Like, just number your population. We've got the resources. We'll give you whatever you want.
Yeah. That's why I had such a reaction to that. Because I was like, I had a moment of realization where it's like, that is an insane thing to say.
Crazy diss.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, no, that's why I say, like, this dude's just very confident, right? He's just very, and again, you understand why he is, because so far they haven't faced any pushback, really. Yeah, but he says, yeah, we'll give you, just listen to reason. Egypt can't help you. Yahweh, maybe he could help you, but he's mad at you, which is ironic because he's not. But he says, you know who can help you? Us. Be smart here. Be wise. Bargain with us. We'll give you stuff, and we'll give you a head start. Right, just get out of here. This town ain't big enough for the two of us. How then can you turn away one official of the least of my master's servants and trust in Egypt for chariots and horsemen?
I don't know about that.
He's like, guys, like, even the smallest of my master's servants is greater than all the armies of Egypt.
It's like when frickin' Rehoboam says,
My loins are bigger than my peak is bigger than my father's loins. Yeah.
That's gross.
So now, have I come up without the approval of Yahweh against this place to make it a ruin? Yahweh said to me, go up against this land and make it a ruin. The big question becomes, did he? Right? Like, we don't know, right? I mean, I'd like to think that Rabshakeh is just blowing smoke here and just being like, oh, and just in case you think God is on your side, I'm just going to let you know, he actually told me to come down here and destroy you. That actually puts it in a weird place, because the question becomes like, I don't know, like, the prophets have been warning us that, Assyria was coming. And so this one, it reminds me of Caiaphas making that prophecy in John chapter 11.
Yeah, I thought that too.
Yeah, where Caiaphas, or Sean, could you just recap that for us, rather than me just talking?
Yeah, they were talking about how they really needed to get rid of Jesus, and they were all arguing about what should be done. And Caiaphas speaks up and says, don't you guys realize, because they were talking about how if they don't stop Jesus, it's going to cause a lot of bloodshed, because he's going to lead a revolt, the Romans are going to lash out, a bunch of people are going to die. And Caiaphas goes, guys, don't you realize that it's better for one man to die for the whole nation? And he didn't realize that he was basically speaking prophetically, like God was speaking through him. Because he was right, both, like, practically speaking, it is better to get rid of one guy and quell the rebellion than to let all their brethren die. But also God was saying something too, like, one man perish that everyone should live.
Yeah. Yeah, and to me, I think a similar thing is happening here, to where we don't know whether or not Rabshakeh actually heard from Yahweh, or if it was him just stumbling upon the truth. I lean towards the second one, but either way, it is true. God did send Assyria down there, and this is what the prophets have been warning them about for a while, right? Isaiah spent 35 chapters saying, guys, Assyria's coming, Assyria's coming, Assyria's coming. But what did he tell them to do when Assyria came?
Trust in God.
Trust in God. So again, you see why these chapters are included in Isaiah. Because this is a super important moment. It's the moment of truth. What is Hezekiah going to do? Alright, we continue on, verses 26 and 27.
Then Eliakim the son of Hilkiah, and Shebna and Joah, said to Rabshakeh, speak now to your servants in Aramaic, for we understand it. And do not speak with us in Judean in the hearing of the people who were on the wall. But Rabshakeh said to them, has my master sent me only to your master and to you who speak these words, and not to the men who sit on the wall, doomed to eat their own dung and drink their own urine with you?
This dude has no class.
Yeah.
Gee.
That's gross.
I always just get annoyed by this guy. I get annoyed by how cocky he is, but also I can guarantee you this is just how soldiers talk to each other all the time. It's just it's just mudslinging. That's all. Well, I guess dung slinging really, but
that's trash.
Yeah. So let's go through this. Then Eliakim the son of Hilkiah and Shebna and Joah said to Rabshakeh, speak now to your servants in Aramaic, for we understand it. Do not speak with us in Judean in the hearing of the people who are on the wall. Why do you think it is that they asked this? Or first off, what's the situation there? With Aramaic and Judean?
He doesn't want everybody to freak out.
Yes, yeah. So at this time period, Aramaic was, it was not the language of the Jewish people, right? Aramaic, this is actually just a fascinating, little history lesson for you. By the time you get to the New Testament, Aramaic actually was the language of the Jewish people, whereas nobody else really spoke it that much. Whereas in the Old Testament it was reversed, to where, because Aramaic ultimately came from the region of Assyria and Babylon. And even to this day, whenever you read Hebrew, the script is actually Aramaic script, right? The original Hebrew letters looked very different. The question becomes, how do you think that shift occurred? Why do you think Jewish people suddenly picked up the Aramaic language?
Because they were in exile for hundreds of years in Assyria and Babylon.
Yeah, they were exiled for a while, and sure enough, whenever they're in Babylon, the book of Daniel, part of it's written in Hebrew, and part of it's written in Aramaic, right? Because he was writing at that time period. And so, whenever they came back from Babylon, they had adopted Aramaic as a language. And so, by the time you get to the New Testament, things had reversed to where the Hebrew language was very rarely spoken. It was mainly just used when reading scripture. Whereas Aramaic was the common lingo. Whereas at this time period in history, it was the opposite. Hebrew was the common language of the people, and Aramaic was simply the royal language that only a few,
the nobles.
Yeah, the nobles would speak it because they needed to know how to converse with people from the north. So that's kind of interesting how, if you just compare Old Testament and New Testament, it's literally reversed. Whereas by the time he gets to the New Testament, Assyria and Babylon are gone, so nobody up north is speaking Aramaic anymore. Now it's just the Jewish people who really speak it. So that's just kind of fun. So in this moment, Eliakim and all of them, they hear what Rabshakeh is saying, and they're probably, a lot of people are standing on the walls, and they can hear him, because you can just imagine this guy's like, he's not talking quietly. He's like, thus says the king of Assyria the Great. Like, he's making a big proclamation. And they're like, hey, dude, could you, talk a little quieter? Maybe we could,
keep it down a little.
Yeah, could you, speak a language that maybe just we can understand? Because you're kind of freaking people out.
Yeah.
You're making them
hey,
think.
we don't need a revolt in the city.
Yeah, it's like, we've been relying on Egypt. And now you've made them think that we shouldn't have done that. And we have been relying on Yahweh. But now you've made them think that he's angry at us. So they're like, hey, do you think maybe we could just talk in a different language? We understand Aramaic. How about going forward, let's speak Aramaic. Can we do that? So they're just trying to calm everybody down. And then Rabshakeh, the stupid little stinker. But Rabshakeh said to them, has my master sent me only to your master and to you to speak these words? And not to the men who sit on the wall, doomed to eat their own dung and drink their own urine?
He has a point. That's the infuriating part.
Yeah. No, he does have a point.
He has a point.
Yeah. No, he says, guys, this information is relevant to everybody. He says, I know that y'all want to keep it between us because you want to boost morale. But don't these people deserve to know what they're about to go through?
He's like, I literally just said that I'm only going to leave less than 2,000 people alive.
Yeah, he says this.
Escape.
Yeah. But like that, so that's the infuriating part. He does have a point, but also you're just like, dude, you knew what they were asking. Like even if what you're saying is true, morale is an important thing to have. Let them die with a little bit of dignity. But then also, but he's also just insulting them, right? Because he's saying this for everybody to hear. And he says, hey guys, I'm going to let y'all keep hearing me because I want y'all to know that in a few days, y'all are going to be drinking urine and eating poop.
That's gross.
It's he's just unnecessarily being an absolute jerk.
Yes.
But again, he's flexing his power, right? That you have to read the pride behind all of this because that's very important to the story, right? Pride.
Yeah.
Throughout Isaiah, what has God said about the proud?
They will be destroyed.
They're going to be humbled. And this is going to be something that we see again in Isaiah chapter 40, right? It says that every mountain will be laid low, every valley will be lifted up, right? That the proud will be humbled and the humble will be exalted. All right. We continue on. Let's see what else Rabshakeh has to say. We're almost to the end of the chapter.
Big stinker.
Then Rabshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice in Judean, saying, hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus says the king, do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he will not be able to deliver you from his hand. And do not let Hezekiah make you trust in Yahweh, saying, Yahweh will surely deliver us, and this city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus says the king of Assyria, make your peace with me, and come out to me, and eat each of his vine and each of his fig tree, and drink each of the waters of his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive oil and honey, that you may live and not die. But do not listen to Hezekiah when he misleads you, saying, Yahweh will deliver us. Has any one of the gods of the nations delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Eviah, when they have delivered Samaria from my hand? Who among all the gods of the lands have delivered their land from my hand, that Yahweh would deliver Jerusalem from my hand?
So, in the Bible where it says that pride comes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall? Well, Rabshakeh doesn't realize it, but he just made a big boo-boo. He just screwed up at the end. He got caught up in his boasting a little too much, and he took it a step too far.
Yeah.
Because so far, he's just been like, oh, y'all shouldn't trust in Egypt. And God's like, yeah, that's what I've been telling them. And then he's like, yeah, and you know what? God sent me here. And God's like, yeah, that's what I've been telling them. And then he says, and you know what? We're a pretty big power. And God's like, yeah, I I gave you that power. And he says, and you know what? Yahweh isn't that cool. And Yahweh's like, hold up, what? He's like, wait a second. He's like, what did you just say? So this is where he took it too far. Like it's like he should have stopped sooner, and maybe things wouldn't have been as bad. But he started saying, you know what? I don't think Yahweh's nearly as cool as like none of the other gods will be able to stop me. You think Yahweh can? And God's like,
Yes.
Oh, well, yes.
well, yeah. It's like, oh, sorry. He's like, I agreed with you. Whatever you were saying, they were terrible. But now you brought me into the picture, and I gotta prove a point. And so
You don't mess with the God
it's
of
like,
Israel. Yes,
like
you don't.
Rajika, the little stinker. All right. I don't know why that phrase just like it just works for him for some reason. Probably because he brings up poop and stuff. I don't know.
Oh. Yeah.
Then Rabshakeh stood and cried out with a loud voice in Judean. It's so stupid. Like I love the author goes out of his way to explain it because like you can tell he has no desire to frame this guy in a positive light. Like because whenever you tell a story, you can try to frame them in a but he has no desire to do this. Like he's saying this guy sucks. Like this is like you don't want to be this guy because.
Don't be Rabshakeh.
Yeah, we don't know anything about this guy other than the fact that when he shows up, he just says a lot of stuff, which also biblically, usually multiplying words, not a good thing. It doesn't usually lead to good consequences. Well, this guy, he says a whole bunch. He doesn't even give them they ask a very basic question, right? Hey, can we just like speak in a language that like can like help us not cause a scene? And he's like, nah, forget y'all. And like he just keeps on going to where the author is intentionally trying to get us to despise this person. Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. I don't know why, but I feel like this is how Trump would talk. That's a whole thing. This is the words of the great king, the king of Assyria, the best king that's ever been. He's huge, he's great, he's powerful. Thus says the king, don't let Hezekiah deceive you. He won't be able to deliver you from his hand. And don't let Hezekiah make you trust in Yahweh, saying, Yahweh will surely deliver us. The city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. So right off the bat there, we learn where Hezekiah stands in all of this. Where does Hezekiah stand?
He's righteous.
He's righteous. Why?
That's good.
Trust in Yahweh.
He's trusting in Yahweh. This is good news to us, right? So far, we've been wondering, right? Because at the beginning, Rabshakeh said, who do you trust in? Right? And he started listing out their options, right? Do you trust in Egypt? Do you trust in Yahweh? Do you trust in yourselves? Well, right here, he makes it clear, I've heard rumors that your king thinks that Yahweh can save you. And as people who've read the Torah, we're like, oh yeah, God's going to save you. Well, like this is what we've been waiting for. And again, if we were reading this in the book of Isaiah, this is where everybody starts clapping. Right? It's like, yes, good for Hezekiah, right? Because that's what Isaiah's been calling them to do. Trust in Yahweh. And now Rabshakeh says, trusting in Yahweh won't save you. And anybody who's been reading Isaiah is like, I beg to differ. Like, yeah, it will. Right? And so it's like it's a very subtle thing because we don't see Hezekiah during this, right? We just see him sending people out. But right here, he says, don't trust Hezekiah. He's trying to deceive you. But all of us are sitting back being like, no, let Hezekiah cook. He's on to something here. Do not shema to Hezekiah, verse 31. For thus says the king of Assyria, make your peace with me, and come out to me, and eat each of his vine, and each of his fig tree, and drink each of his waters of his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of oil and honey, that you may live and not die. Sounds like a classic politician, huh? So what does Rabshakeh offer them?
Land.
Life, basically.
Yeah.
Bread and
But like abundant life.
Yeah.
Right? He's making an empty promise here.
life.
Right? He says, guys, don't let Hezekiah... Hezekiah, if you follow Hezekiah, you know what we're going to end up doing? You're going to be under siege. You're going to be destroyed by us. We don't want that. None of us want that. The Assyrians, we love y'all.
We're not
In
bad guys.
Yeah, we're not bad guys. We're here to help you. In fact, if you surrender to us right now, we will take you to a land flowing with milk and honey, and we will give you everything you ever desired. Which is ironic because the land they're currently living in was pitched to them in the same way, right? that's what God said, right? I'll take you to a land flowing with milk and honey. Like, and even the language there, a place flowing with like a land of new wine, land of bread and vineyards, land of oil and honey. Like, that's language that goes back to the Torah whenever God described the land of Israel, right? And that's not because Rabshakeh is referencing the Torah. It's because this is just common ways to reference abundance at that time period, right? Whenever it says each person sits at his own vine and each of his own fig tree, the idea is just prosperity, right? You're not having to constantly work. No. You have so much abundance that you can just chill out under your fig tree and relax, right? Like that. That's something that we take for granted nowadays. Like, nowadays, we just we're privileged by the fact that we have so much that we just get to, we try to figure out what to do with our free time. Whereas in most cultures, you work from sunrise to sunset, and then you go to sleep and then get back to work because you're just constantly striving. That's why the Sabbath was such a big deal. It's like, God's like, no, I want you to take a day off. And they're like, huh? And they had a tough time doing that. Whereas for us, we're like, I just want 30 days off. Like, is that too much to ask? We're like, I just want a bunch of vacations. But no, so Rabshakeh is offering them something which God has already given them. Right? He's like, guys, if you trust in me, I'll take you to another land and it'll be amazing. It'll be wonderful. Land flowing with milk and honey. And they should be like, we're already in a land flowing with milk and honey. That's what God has given us. So you're telling us to not trust in God. But every time we've trusted in God, he has given us what he promised. Whereas with Assyria, you know what they're going to do? Well,
kill us all.
No, they'll do that. Like, they will do what they've said, except they won't take them to a land flowing with milk and honey. They will displace them to another land where they will be servants. And what we know about Assyrians is that they would put hooks in people's noses, and then they would attach the noses like the hooks by chains, and literally march people off into slavery, just being attached to one another. It's really disgusting. It was just a matter of humiliation, right? To where you're literally attached to one another, not by just chains around the wrist, but by the nose. Wow. And you actually have depictions of them doing this and stuff. These were not good, nice people, right? But this is what politicians do a lot of times, right? They'll try to paint their agenda in the most positive light, and they'll give you a bastardized version of what they promise, right? Oh, land flowing with milk and honey. Okay, all right. So what are we getting? A land. Where's the milk and honey? Oh, it's coming. Just wait a few years. All right. Well, where's our freedom? Oh, you gotta work for your freedom. It's like, okay, all of a sudden it begins to change, right? But he's making all these promises, but he says, do not listen to Hezekiah when he misleads you, saying Yahweh will deliver us. Probably the most important thing to highlight is what he had said at the end, right before that. He says that you may live and not die. So he covers up the true agenda with all these flowery words, but really it comes down to those last words right there, right? You have two options: live or die, right? If you surrender to us, we allow you to live, and I'll make it sound like it's abundant life. It's really not abundant life. If you don't surrender, we kill you, right? Those are really the options, but he tries to cover that by saying a lot of pretty stuff ahead of time. Do not listen to Hezekiah when he misleads you, saying Yahweh will deliver us. Bless you.
Thank you.
You dabbed. You were shoot!
Yep.
That's the way to do it. And this, verse 33 through 35, is where Rabshakeh takes it too far. Has any one of the gods of the nations delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? What is the answer to that?
Not so far.
Not so far. No, there hasn't been. Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Ivah? When have they delivered Samaria from my hand? All right, well, what's the answer to those questions?
No.
I don't know. They didn't help out, right? They are, I guess, weaker.
They're not real.
Yeah. And so you can already see Rabshakeh's logic here, but this is like in a horror movie whenever the person's walking to the basement, you're like, don't do it! Starting in verse 33, you're like, Rabshakeh, I see what you're about to say. You don't want to go there. Right? He's like, yeah. He's like, has anybody else been able to stop us? Well, technically, no. All right, well, where were their gods? I don't know where their gods were at. But be careful what you say next. Verse 35. Who among all the gods of the lands have delivered their land from my hand, that Yahweh would deliver Jerusalem from my hand?
Wow.
He never wanted to.
He's like, all right, Buster, you took it too far. When you made it about me and my people, you had a point. But now you made it about my God. And now we got an issue. Right? This is where, God begins to roll up his sleeves. He's like, all right. He's like, I've got a point I need to make here. Earlier, Sean alluded to Exodus 32 to 34, which is right after the whole golden calf incident. And you referenced the fact, like, whenever God said, you know what, Moses, I will take you out to the land, but I'm not going with you. And Moses said, well, if you're not going, we're not going, right? And that was the second offer that God had made. But before that, he made another offer to Moses. He said, Moses, you know what? Forget these people. I'm going to destroy them and start over with you. And Moses could have said plenty of things. He could have said, God, but these people, they deserve you. He didn't say that because that would be false. Instead, he says, God, consider your glory. He says, you just made it known to everybody that these are your chosen people with the whole Exodus thing. He says, if you destroyed them only a few months afterwards, people would think that you weren't powerful enough to keep them alive. And if your goal is to bring people back to yourself, that's not going to do it. So he says, God, remember your glory. And God says, you passed the test, right? So like, I was like, all right, fine. I guess I'll forgive him. Long story short, throughout the Bible, the thing that God cares about most of all, I hate to break it to you, it's not us. Mm-hmm. It's his glory.
Amen.
Right? Because the thing, and keep in mind, those are not separate things. Because, like, his glory being exalted in all things is beneficial to us. Right? Like, we have to understand that. Like, it is the best for his creation whenever creation is unified and glorifying him. Like, I'll just say that. But that is the number one goal for him. And whenever Jesus died for us, his main goal was not simply love for us. He says, I'm doing this so that the world may know that I love the Father. Right? Jesus, his main ambition was the glory of God. Right? And that's consistently throughout Scripture, that is the number one thing. Whether you eat or drink, whatever you do all for the glory of God. Rabshakeh took it too far. Because now he said, I'm not just here about the glory of Judah or the glory of Hezekiah. I'm here about the glory of God. And I am here to show you that your God is no match for us. And God's like, sorry, you said what? He's like, oh, all right.
It's definitely match for
so, we're not going to finish the story today. It's going to end on a bit of a cliffhanger, but let's read verses 36 and 37. This is where chapter 18 ends.
But the people were silent, and answered him not a word. For the king's commandment was, do not answer him. Then Eliakim the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah the son of Asaph, the recorder, came to Hezekiah with their clothes torn, and told him the words of Rabshakeh.
All right. So, like I said,
I
I don't know. Like, to me, this is one of those places where the chapter ends at a frustrating point because you want it to continue on. But if this were a TV show, this would be a pretty good place for, like, into the episode to where it's like, I don't know, like, it feels dramatic enough where it's like, he brings in Yahweh and they're like, you said what? And then all of a sudden you just have, like, this, like, closing montage of them, like, walking up to Hezekiah and they're all, like, torn up and, like, they're, like, just, like, all eaten up. And I just almost imagine, like, Hezekiah hearing their words and then, like, a slight, like, grin just pops up on his face and then just, like, cuts to black. And you're like, uh-oh, what's in store next? So yeah, this part, what happens?
People are silent. Answer no word. Do not answer him.
They bite
The
their tongue
people
and-
apparently have
Sealed.
a lot of faith in Hezekiah as a king if they will listen to him to, like, not answer Rabshakeh at all.
Yeah, well, especially, do you know how much self-restraint that takes? Because, oh my lord, like, this guy is annoying, right? I mean, just, in the moment, you probably just want to be like, you're
But
stupid,
imagine,
right?
imagine being Rabshakeh in that situation. You give this whole, like, speech, boasting, prideful, claiming power, basically acting as a prophet and saying you're going to destroy these people, and in return you get complete and utter silence.
Yeah.
And he's just like, okay, that's not what I was expecting.
It's like, he just goes on this long, these, like long speech, and probably, keep in mind, the speech is probably even longer than what we have in here, right? This is like giving us like the Spark Notes version, probably.
Yeah.
He like goes through this whole thing, and they're just like, "We're sorry you feel that way." And they just leave. It's like, oh, like he's like, okay, like which honestly
finishes talking and complete silence.
it's like it's probably pretty humiliating for him because it's like at the very least you would think that like he would merit some sort of response.
At least one person goes, "Hey, that's not cool."
Yeah, but instead there's like, all right, and they just walk inside, and it's kind of like it's just humiliating to the point like even if they win the battle, you know that like he's probably not going to bed that night. Like he probably lost a few hours of sleep that night, being like, dang, that was embarrassing. Like, shoot.
I practiced that thing for months.
Yeah, his wife's like, "Hey, honey, how'd that speech go?" Don't want to talk about it. They just like
Scream in terror.
Reign of terror.
But the people were silent and answered him not a word, for the king's commandment was, "Do not answer him." So, what's funny is that like I guess they went into this knowing they weren't going to respond, right? They were sent out, and they're like, "Hey, will you speak in Aramaic, please?" He's like, "Nope." Goes on this long thing. He's like, "Bye." They're like, "Oh, okay." Then Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe. Actually, I want to look into this. I'm pretty sure that at some point in the story it said that Shebna the scribe was over the household, and then it like switches. Because remember how I was saying in Isaiah it like reversed it? Either that or maybe I have the Isaiah thing in mind where we see that these events took place after the Isaiah stuff. Because in Isaiah 22 it says, "I will take your spot and give it to Eliakim." And now we see that Eliakim is over the household. I just think that's kind of cool. So Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah the son of Asaph, the recorder, came to Hezekiah with their clothes torn and told him the word of Rabshakeh. Why are the clothes torn?
They're in stress. They're freaking out.
They're anxious. They're
They're grieving, right? They're in a state of distress and grief, and they come to him. They're not super encouraged, but they tell Hezekiah, and the big question becomes, what will Hezekiah do? And in order to get that answer, you'll have to come back tomorrow. Or not tomorrow. Next. I wish it was tomorrow. Wouldn't that be great if we could just do Bible studies every day? That'd be awesome.
Right.
But no, next week.
Yeah, who needs to
Come back
do
next
that
week.
stupid budget meeting anyway?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Anyways, real quick, last thing I wanted to share here, just because we talked about it earlier. This is not about the dating thing. This is about Sennacherib's prism. That was the
the Lachish thing?
yeah. Also, the Lachish letters are also a separate thing.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that's what you're thinking of, but I just wanted to read. This is just off Wikipedia summarizing it. It's not actually quoting the thing. But Sennacherib's prism, which details the events of Sennacherib's campaign against Judah, was discovered in the ruins of Nineveh in 1830, and it's now stored in Chicago. The prism dates.
Sorry.
Yeah, that happens a lot. The prism dates from about 690 BC, and its account is taken from an earlier cuneiform inscription dating 700 BC. The text of the prism boasts of how Sennacherib destroyed 46 of Judah's cities and trapped Hezekiah in Jerusalem like a caged bird. The text goes on to describe how the terrifying splendor of the Assyrian army caused the Arabs and the mercenaries reinforcing the city to desert. It adds that the Assyrian king returned to Assyria, where they later received a large tribute from Judah. The description varies somewhat from the Jewish version of the Tanakh. The massive Assyrian casualties mentioned in the Tanakh are not mentioned in the Assyrian version. So this story is going to end with a bunch of Assyrians being dead, whereas they don't mention that part, which isn't that unexpected.
They wouldn't. I mean,
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, we surrounded the city. Yeah, we have him trapped. The entire army is gone, but yeah.
Yeah, and also I just want to highlight that from the Bible is very unique in the fact that whenever the Israelites lose, it records that. Because most cultures do not do that. Most cultures, whenever they lose, they usually either don't mention the battle at all, or they say it was a draw. they try to frame it positively. Whereas the Bible, I would say that argues for its historical authenticity, in addition to all the other stuff we have. But it just shows it's not.
Yeah.
It's not looking through rose-colored glasses. It is literally like, oh yeah, even the heroes, they make bad. Like Hezekiah, great guy, made bad choices. Sometimes Israel loses. Sometimes they do stupid stuff. I just think that's cool. So, yeah. All right. Anything y'all want to add to wrap this bad boy up?
Don't be like Rob Chica.
Yes.
Yeah,
be
don't
like
make a
Rashka.
negative speech. Let's say like, what do you think your God is that He will deliver you guys from me?
Yeah. Don't be like Rabshika, and don't be
Yeah.
like the guy who gave me the door earlier. Don't be like it.
Don't be like,
Anyways, somebody want to close that in prayer?
I guess I'll do it.
Go for it, man.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much again for bringing us here to study your word. I pray, Lord, that we would let it change us, God, and may we trust in you, God, and live for you out there in this world. And may your will be done. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Mm.